How to Engage with Those of a Different Worldview by Andy Mcclean. Many atheists and skeptics would try to argue that the biblical Christian worldview should be seen as a matter of personal concern or something that falls into the category of opinion. However, nothing could be further from the truth. On the contrary, the Christian worldview is ultimately based on historical and publicly accessible facts and evidences, such as the historical person and resurrection of Jesus. And these facts and evidences turn into reasons for why we believe what we believe. Thus, far from being a matter of simple religious opinion, the Christian worldview engages with the facts and evidences, testing them for historical credibility and logical coherence. By doing so, the Christian worldview not only deals with matters of objective truth, but also informs the way we are to live in this world, including the way and manner we converse with those of different worldviews. Many people hold the opinion that all religious beliefs are true and valid. There are people from both sides of the culture that hold to this idea of religious relativism, even in spite of the obvious logical contradictions that this entails. After all, how can the religious belief that there are many gods and the belief that there is one God both be true at the same time? In fact, religious relativism is so ingrained in our culture that to disagree with it will guarantee you the label of being religiously intolerant. Believing that one's view is correct, however, and that someone else's is incorrect does not in itself entail intolerance. To be tolerant means to accept the idea that not everyone will believe as you do, and that people can coexist with different beliefs, whether religious or otherwise. Thus, one can be tolerant of other religious beliefs without believing that all religious beliefs are true and valid. In fact, to show the inconsistency of the way the term is used, just look at the relativist who is intolerant of those who make exclusive religious claims like Christianity. Religious relativism is nothing new. The first century Christians, for example, had to face it and were persecuted, even to the point of death, because they believed Jesus when he said, "No one comes to the Father except through me." They rejected the notion that Jesus was just one truth about God among many. Therefore, they proclaimed to those around them, "There is salvation in no one else, for there is no other name given among men by which we must be saved." Acts 4:12. The Apostle Paul witnessed religious relativism at the Areopagus in Acts 17, and we can learn several things from how he responded to it. First, Paul was deeply distressed when he saw Athens filled with idolatry, Acts 17:16. Because of Paul's Christian worldview and how it had shaped his character, he could feel such compassion and even distress for those he considered so misled. Likewise, we should allow God's truth to shape our own character and tone when we engage those of a different worldview. Our words and tone are inconsistent if they are not matched by Christian character and exemplary living. Our attitude must be one of compassionate concern for people, and we must listen with interest to what they have to say. Otherwise, our efforts will be in vain. Second, Paul also knew well what he believed, which made him articulate in communicating effectively the central message of the gospel, the good news about Jesus and the resurrection. This is ultimately the same imperative we have today. Know what you believe. This point may seem obvious, but it is worth underscoring. We cannot articulate the reasons to believe if we don't really understand what we believe. This means that far from just studying a bunch of arguments from archaeology or science, we need to first be grounded in the content of our faith. Third, Paul's strategy is to find a suitable and effective vehicle for making a compelling case for the Christian worldview to his audience. He had observed that they were religious and that they admitted, at least in theory, that their knowledge about God was limited. He found an opening to reveal their lack of knowledge about God through one of their own unmarked religious altars. Paul opened by saying, "Therefore, what you worship in ignorance, this I proclaim to you." But the God he proclaimed was quite different from theirs. The God who made the world and everything in it, he is Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in shrines made by hands. Neither is he served by human hands, as though he needed anything, since he himself gives everyone life and breath and all things. Finally, from the larger address, we can also tell that Paul was familiar with their own Greek philosophical assumptions and could even quote from their poets and written works. In other words, in knowing they were both religious and philosophical, Paul charted a path of discourse that would resonate with his audience, using familiar categories that would ultimately challenge their assumptions. For instance, ever since the time of the Greeks, philosophers have been asking questions about ultimate reality. They wondered, not unlike our own scientists today in search of a unified theory, how everything fits together. What is the essence of all things? What is it that unites all the particulars? In response, Paul presents to them the God who made from one man, every nationality to live over the whole earth and has determined their appointed times and the boundaries of where they live. He did this so that they might seek God, and perhaps they might reach out and find him, though he is not far from each of us. For in him we live and move and have our being. The answer to the age-old question of what it is that unites all things and holds all things together, according to Paul, is Christ. He holds all things together, for all things were created through him and for him. We can look and investigate things like atoms and quarks, but in the end, none of these things will make any ultimate sense apart from the one who created them and for whose glory they exist. Paul gives us here an exemplary demonstration of what it means to winsomely converse with others from a different worldview. Like Paul, we need to know how best to communicate our beliefs to others. Although explaining why we believe is part of our task, another part is searching for the best possible means of communicating those reasons to others. That involves knowing the person we are talking to and trying to make the case to them in the most compelling way we can. This may mean using stories and analogies for some, or logical arguments for others. Whatever the vehicle of delivery, stories, analogies, logical arguments, etc., the objective is to match it to our audience. Although dialoguing with people of different worldviews has its challenges, Paul gives us a very helpful model for engaging with others that is both gracious and informative when it comes to helping them understand the central message of the Christian worldview. We are told in Revelation 7:9 that heaven will be filled with people from every nation, tribe, people, and language. No doubt the majority of them had a very different religious worldview before repenting of their sins and trusting in Jesus alone for their salvation. God loves all people and desires that they come to know Christ. Because of that, we too should love those in other religions by humbly sharing the truth of the gospel with them, answering whatever questions they may have, and introducing them to the only one who is capable of transforming them from the inside out, Jesus.